I call this meeting to order of the Town of Cary Planning and Zoning Board. Thank you for joining us tonight. All board members, staff, applicants are participating remotely. Our board clerk, Julie Mitchell, will now take roll call for this evening.
Thank you, Chair. Please state aye or present when I call your name. Andy Coe.
Aye.
Jessica McClure.
Present.
Jeff Moncrief.
Present.
Don Hamilton.
Present.
Stephen Crutchfield.
Present.
Mary Jo Hill.
Present.
John Sorrell.
Present.
Michael Roselli. I believe Jessica Pearson and Michael Roselli are absent this evening. Thank you.
Okay, I guess it's possible that Mike could join later, but for now we'll just go with it. We've got two board members out this evening. We still have enough for a quorum, so we can continue forward.
If he joins the call, Chair, I will let you know.
Perfect, thank you. We'll therefore continue forward into the meeting. The Cary Community Plan will continue to be the guiding document for this board. Our role is to function as citizen advisors to the town council, who always make the final decision on rezoning activity. Your citizen opinions based on the Cary Community Plan document are a very important role in advising our town leaders. While this is a public meeting, please be aware that it is not a public hearing. There is no opportunity for the public to speak during this meeting. If you have comments about any of these cases, we encourage you to reach out to the staff, case manager, or the applicant by email or phone. You may reach out to our board members through email. You may also contact council directly through email or during the public speaks out portion of any regularly scheduled town council meeting. Because we are meeting remotely, I will call on each board member individually to confirm their vote. All motions, seconds, and votes will be verbally obtained. These meetings may be streamed live on the Town of Cary website and or YouTube, and are available online if you'd like to view past meetings. Just a couple of announcements. I'd like to take a moment to congratulate our board member, Andy Coe, who has been approved by the Town Council to move from his position as an alternate to a regular board member. So welcome to aboard officially, Andy, even though you have participated, I believe, in every meeting.
Thank you.
Obviously, we had hoped that this meeting was going to be in person, but due to circumstances with the virus, decision was made to stay virtual. I sincerely hope that sometime in the immediate future we can get back to an in-person meeting, but for now we will continue with our virtual meetings, which I think have worked quite well so far. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Would one of the board members please make a motion to adopt the agenda?
Make a motion to adopt. This is Don.
Thank you, Don. Can I get a second, please?
I'll second. This is Jeff.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call roll on the adoption of the agenda. Andy Coe.
Approved.
Mary Jo Hill. Mary Jo.
Approved.
Thank you. Jessica McClure.
Aye.
Jeff Moncrief.
Approved.
John Sorrell.
Aye.
Don Hamilton.
Aye.
And Steve Crutchfield also is aye. As we move forward, can I get a motion to approve the December 13th meeting minutes unless someone is aware of a change that we need to talk about?
I'll make a motion to approve. It's
Thank
Jessica
you.
McClure.
Can I get a second, please? I think I heard one. Who was that?
I'll second Andy
Thank
Coe.
you. Okay, if you'll just vote aye or for the approval of the meeting minutes. Don Hamilton,
Aye.
John Sorrell,
Aye.
Jeff Moncrief,
Aye.
Jessica McClure,
Aye.
Mary Jo Hill,
Aye.
Andy Coe,
Aye.
and Steve Crutchfield, aye. All right, thank you. The first case on the agenda is Act 21 Land Development Ordinance, and our senior planner, Aaron Puckett, will share the staff's presentation. There will not be an applicant speaking on this case. All board members will have an opportunity to ask questions of the staff following Ms. Puckett's presentation. You may now proceed.
Thank you so much and good evening, Board. I'm excited to be here this evening to share the proposed Act amendment for multifamily parking rates. As many of you are probably aware, we have experienced frequent requests through the MXD and PDD rezoning process to establish custom multifamily parking rates, often well below the rates required by our current LDO. In 2019, Council directed staff to complete a study of multifamily parking in Cary to better understand what the most appropriate rates would be. In 2020, staff went through the RFP process and hired Walker Consultants, who collected Cary-specific data and put together their analysis and recommendations in a memorandum which is attached to your staff report. We shared an overview of Walker's findings with Council at their work session in April last year, and later presented the findings and preliminary recommendations to a developer group in fall of 2021, who had generally positive feedback to the proposed changes. And a public hearing was held for this amendment at the December 2021 council meeting. As a reminder, Cary's LDO currently requires 2 spaces per unit for 1 and 2 bedroom multifamily dwellings, with an extra half a space per bedroom over 2, and a quarter space per unit for visitor parking. This is identical to the parking requirements for townhouses. And I'd also like to clarify that no changes are proposed to detached dwelling or townhouse parking with this amendment. So now I'd like to show you how our current rates compare regionally and nationally. This slide compares our current multifamily parking requirements to an average of our regional peers, as well as 2 industry accepted rates from the Institute of Transportation Engineers and the Urban Land Institute. As can be seen here, Cary's rate is often higher than other municipalities as well as industry rates, particularly for 1-bedroom units and visitor parking. So Walker Consultants began the parking study by coordinating with an interdepartmental group of staff who identified 12 existing apartment developments for Walker's data collection. These developments varied by geographic location, size, age, and the rate at which they were parked. Walker's team visited each site to verify actual parking supply and then returned to survey parking space occupancy at 6 total time periods across a weekday and a Saturday to identify the highest demand for each development. The peak occupancy was then adjusted based on the current vacancy rate of the development to reflect the parking demand when units were 100% occupied. I would also like to note that we had an early conversation with the consultant team about whether we should delay data collection until after the pandemic. They felt that any visitor parking demand that might be reduced during the pandemic was likely offset by the number of residents working from home and staying home in general. In their professional expertise, they felt the data collected would approximate the pre-pandemic rates. Across all 12 sites they surveyed, Walker found that no development needed 100% of their provided parking, even when the demand was inflated to reflect full unit occupancy, with multiple developments having a large number of excess spaces. In fact, there were nearly 1,700 excess parking spaces total in the 12 surveyed developments. If we assume the typical size of a 9 by 18 parking space, that equates to 6.3 acres of land, and that's not including associated drive aisles or other paved areas that might be needed. Based on the data collected, Walker ultimately found that the large majority of multifamily developments in Cary could be adequately parked at a rate just below 1 space per bedroom. Staff and the consultants reviewed the study results and analysis, and we ultimately recommend changes to the 1-bedroom and visitor parking rates, with the 2 and 3 or more bedroom unit rates remaining the same. The proposed LDO amendment would modify both the parking requirements table in the ordinance, as well as some rates in town center zoning, where multifamily units are currently parked at a flat rate of 2 spaces per unit, which would allow for the reduced rate of 1 space for 1-bedroom units, and would otherwise keep the 2 spaces per unit for multifamily dwellings of 2 or more bedrooms. So revisiting our comparison graph, we can see how these proposed reductions bring the 1-bedroom and visitor rate much more closely in line with both regional and national standards. An analysis of the proposed Act amendment against the Imagine Cary Community Plan found that policies in the Live, Shape, and Serve chapters apply most directly. By reducing required parking, the amendment could impact rental rates by directly reducing development costs. The Live chapter encourages provision of a variety of housing types and price ranges for our diverse citizenry. The amendment could also help support infill or redevelopment by reducing an element of the site development which uses substantial area and which is often more limited on redevelopment and infill sites. Reducing the amount of required parking would provide opportunities to reduce impermeable surface, thus potentially creating beneficial stormwater and air quality impacts. Council held a public hearing for this Act amendment at their December meeting. No citizens spoke or submitted comments. Council members did have several comments. They wanted to ensure a variety of time periods were studied, especially evening or night hours, and we confirmed that the consultant did collect data during the day, evening, and overnight on both a weekday and Saturday. Council members also wanted some assurance that the proposed rates were somewhat consistent with the rates they have been approving with recent flexible zoning cases. Staff did research this, and the reduced rates approved over the last few years were overall very close to the rates that would be applied with this amendment. Council also commented that more studies may be needed specific to parking for EV charging, as well as an assessment of townhouse parking rates. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. As with any rezoning case, when the board is reviewing this LDO, please keep in mind the community plan. And as you think about your questions and how this proposed LDO fits or does not fit the community plan, try to tie this into one of the chapters from the plan, like work, shape, or live, when you come up with your motions and as you think about how this fits or does not fit. We'll open this up now for any questions from the board, and we'll start with you, Don. Any questions?
Excuse me, Chair.
Yep.
I just wanted to let you know that Mike Roselli has joined the call.
Thank you very much. Glad to have him. Don, go ahead.
I do have one question. I apologize if it was in the staff report. I had internet issues over the weekend. Do you know how they came up with to estimate the visitor parking?
Yes, so that's actually based primarily on industry accepted rates. They found that our rate of 0.25 per unit was a little high as compared to those industry rates. The 0.15 specifically was recommended by the Urban Land Institute. So going back to the results of the study, they really estimated that that rate of right around 1 space per bedroom would probably adequately park almost every single development. So that kind of extra 0.15 spaces per unit for visitor parking is almost a little bit of a buffer in most cases. It's giving us that visitor parking could we do without it? For most developments, we probably could actually just do without it, but we felt that that was maybe too much of a change from the 0.25 we currently have. We do want to ensure some amount of visitor parking, so it made most sense to meet that industry standard that was just a little bit below what we have currently.
Great. I appreciate it.
Anything else, Don? Is it
No, sir.
John Sorrell? Comments, questions?
Yeah, I have two quick questions. The scope and scale of the size of the developments that were studied, were they primarily large apartment complexes or small apartment complexes, or was there a mix in the unit count that was there total?
It was very much a mix. We had everything ranging from a little over 120 units to over 700. So we did try to vary the size.
Okay. And I'm curious on the one space per unit, was there any thought given to extremely small apartment complexes? You know, if you get down to a very low unit count and primarily, one bedroom units, I could see that reaching a failure point. Is there any scaling in the policy to try to capture what that lower end would be?
There's not, again, we do have that extra 0.15 spaces per unit built in for visitor, which would hopefully help for some of that. And at the end of the day, we hope that if that were the case, if we had some unique apartment development that was going to be 90% one bedroom, to some extent, the theory is that the market would regulate that a little bit. So they're not going to want to underpark because they're not going to be able to lease units. So there may be some extreme circumstance where the market ends up offering a little more if it was truly all one bedroom units. But generally speaking, the consultant found that even if they were all parked at one, that's going to accommodate approximately 85% of all developments, regardless of the number of bedrooms.
That makes perfect sense. I know the bulk of the complexes that we see come in have a wide variety of mixes of units and are larger. You do see the little weird ones every now and then, and it makes good sense. We can let the market control that. Thank you.
Perfect. Jeff Moncrief, questions?
No, I don't have any questions at this time. I think the report was well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica McClure, questions?
More of just a general observation, and I want to make sure I noted this right, that we have over 6 acres of impervious surface that's essentially not being utilized for its purpose.
That is correct, and that's just over the 12 apartment complexes that were surveyed. So we anticipate this could save some impermeable surface if implemented.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to note as far as not only, stormwater runoff and all of that, but, green spaces or something else that could be incorporated into these communities. So I just found that note very, very interesting, but glad we did the study.
Excellent. Mary Jo Hill, questions?
I don't have questions. I had the exact same observation as Jessica just made. It was kind of stunning to think about 7 acres sitting there unused, if that's in fact the case. So again, glad that the study was done and that some evaluation of what we have proposed in the past is being reconsidered.
Excellent. Andy Coe, questions?
Along the same lines, as was just mentioned, I guess my question would be, assuming this proposal was approved by the council, would this allow current developments to also update their property? So not only just for future developments, but current developments that they could use those additional spaces that aren't being used for other purposes. Is that correct?
That's correct. So yes, if a development wanted to utilize a portion of those underused or unused spaces for community gathering space, or even for additional building or storage or something like that, we could allow them to, once approved, be treated under these new rates if they wanted to develop those spaces as other things on their parcel.
Right, okay, thank you.
Hey, Mike Roselli, I'm not exactly sure where you joined in, but did you have any questions on this particular LDM?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. And for myself, I think this is great that we did this. This has been really needed for a long time. Just back on the visitor spaces again, that the reduction on the bedroom unit makes total sense to me. I'm a little worried about the visitor spaces. And is that something that you guys would come back maybe and check in the near future? That's the only one to me that I question a little bit is, even though because of COVID, I know what you're saying that people are working from home, but there are a lot of people that don't have the ability to do that may be out. So that's the only one that I was concerned about.
I think that's a fair comment, especially knowing when the data collection took place. And it is something that we could come back at a future date and kind of see how that's performing. However, that being said, I'll say we were given some assurance when we saw Walker's report in knowing that the Urban Land Institute, their rate is recommended at 0.15. So nationally, that's kind of treated as an acceptable rate. The Institute of Transportation Engineers, I believe, had 0 for visitor parking. And then again, looking at our regional peers, our 0.25 that we have codified currently is substantially higher than those regional peers, many of whom either don't have a visitor rate or have one that's closer to this 0.15 or even 0.1. So we do have some reassurance with all of that data and kind of the best practices recommended by other organizations that we're probably right in line with this 0.15 being a more current rate for today's market.
Okay, just one other quick question. On the EV charging stations, does the town have the ability to make that a condition for future developments? It seems that it's almost, I just can't contemplate that anybody would build anything at this point without having charging stations. But, I don't know what the proper ratio would be. I know it'd be very difficult, but again, not a lot of usage now, but 2, 3, 4 years from now, it'll be a lot more expensive for people to add versus putting them in during original construction.
That's a great comment. As with any rezoning case, we can never require an applicant to offer that. However, we are seeing that as a condition more and more often. We've also had pre-application meetings where developers have told us that almost everything they build now, residentially speaking at least, does have some amount of EV charging. So I know it's something that council also wants us to study more in the future, and I'm sure that'll probably be forthcoming. But I think we are seeing a movement already towards that, with a lot of applicants voluntarily offering that as a condition, especially for residential projects.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Anyone else on the board have any additional questions at this or comments? Okay, having said that, would someone on the board make a motion for Act 21 Land Development Ordinance? I think our words are now up on the screen.
This is Don. I'll make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move that the board find Act 21 amendments to the Land Development Ordinance to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation, and discussion by the P&Z board.
Perfect. Would someone like to second that?
This is John Sorrell. I'll second that.
Thank you. Okay, Don, what are your thoughts?
I'm just going to repeat what others have said. I think the trickle-down effect of this is going to be huge for more green space, surface, lower rent costs. I think it all is going to be a good thing.
Perfect. John?
Yeah, I'm really glad to see this. I know we've talked about it for a long time. It's really glad to see this moving forward. I would encourage staff to continue looking at it. I think we're on a trend and it's going to continue changing, especially as we get more transit adoption in some larger areas like Fenton and some of the bus rapid transit connections. There may be opportunities to look at further reducing these in areas that do have those higher densities and transit options. So I see that as kind of the next frontier, but I'm really glad to see this. It's a step in the right direction. Thanks.
Excellent. Mike Roselli, comments?
No comments, other than I'm excited to see this part of Cary because it's surrounded and it's very hard to fit something in here. I'm glad to see this happen.
Excellent. Jeff Moncrief?
No, I think that it's good to see that we're, in line with industry standards and also in line with some of our competing, neighbors, because these developers have options on where they go, and we're seeing to be more in line with what the norm would be, and so it should reduce the number of exceptions we see going forward. Not to mention the fact that the greenway, so the live, the work, the different things that were listed earlier, it does support the plan, so I support it.
Thank you. Mary Jo Hill, comments? Mary Jo, any additional comments? Okay, we'll keep going while she gets Andy Coe, comments?
No additional comments. I think the staff did a great job putting together the plan and recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Mary Jo, did you get back? Any comments?
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
It's okay. Very well.
Okay, sorry.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
I'll just reiterate what I said earlier. It's a good thing to be able to release land that's not being used effectively or efficiently by parking spaces. And also, as was also mentioned, the fact that we can be consistent with what is done nationally and not look to be more restrictive, which in turn ripples to the work and the live policies in terms of future approvals and making them more accessible for the right type of development.
Thank you. I agree with really everything that the board has said, and this is, I think, hopefully will be very welcome by the applicant community that comes to us to give them a little bit more of a definitive idea of what they should be or should at least look at doing, and it might make future cases go a lot smoother. Any other comments? Okay, having said that, we'll go ahead and take a vote from the board members. Don Hamilton,
Aye.
John Sorrell,
Aye.
Mike Roselli,
Aye.
Jeff Moncrief,
Aye.
Jessica McClure,
Aye.
Mary Jo Hill,
Aye.
Andy Coe,
Aye.
and Steve Crutchfield also votes aye. Okay, thank you. The second case on the agenda is 20 REZ 12 Macedonia Place rezoning. Planning Manager Katie Dry will share the staff's presentation. Following the presentation, the applicant will share their remarks. All board members will have an opportunity to ask questions of staff and applicant. Ms. Fry, you may proceed.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Board. This is a request to rezone 10.94 acres at the intersection of Macedonia Road and Jones Franklin Road. This site may look familiar to you because it was rezoned in 2018 to allow for senior multifamily units. This rezoning will remove the age restriction from the request, as well as several other changes, which I will cover in the presentation. So even though the site was previously rezoned, it has not yet been developed. This image shows the street view looking south on Macedonia Road. And looking at the property on Jones Franklin Road is reflected in this image. The apartments in this picture are the Franklin apartments, which are located to the north of the site. Across Jones Franklin Road to the east is the City of Raleigh's jurisdiction, and to the west is a mix of undeveloped land and the recently built State Employees Credit Union. The current and the proposed zoning is the mixed-use district. The mixed-use district zoning requires a preliminary development plan to be associated with the rezoning. And so in this case, even though the zoning district remains as MXD, the associated preliminary development plan will be updated. The Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Facilities Master Plan does not propose any parks within or adjacent to the site. A street side trail is proposed to the northwest. The PDP includes a pedestrian connection to facilitate access to this proposed street side trail. Go Cary Route 1 serves Jones Franklin Road. The LDO requires that development on transit corridors provide new transit access. This proposal has identified a transit stop on their PDP. Cary's GIS maps do not indicate the presence of a stream buffer on the site. Field determination of those features, however, would be required at the time of development plan review. This rezoning includes a preliminary development plan which shows the site will be developed with one multifamily building that will be a maximum height of 75 feet, with surface parking, a stormwater control measure located at the intersection of Macedonia and Jones Franklin Road, and a community gathering space of at least 30,000 square feet. The PDP on its face looks very similar to the preliminary development plan, which was approved in 2018. This next table will show some of the key changes. So previously, the use that was proposed was for age-restricted multifamily or life care community. The applicants are now proposing multifamily, and there will not be an age restriction. They're proposing to reduce the number of units from 250 dwellings to 226. The height will remain the same. They're proposing to increase the community gathering area from 8,000 to 30,000 square feet. And they're proposing 3 modifications, which are the same from the previous approval. And the applicant, in their justification, stated that as a result of COVID-19, the applicant is seeking to only remove the age restrictions so that the development will be available to a wider market instead of just seniors. So conditions that are associated with this current proposal include increasing the planting size within the streetscape, variation of roof style and pitch. Stormwater control measure will be amenitized with sidewalk connections and a decorative fountain. The community gathering area will be 30,000 square feet, and it will contain at least 3 amenities from a pick list, and there will be 10 electric vehicle charging stations. Conditions that have been added since the public hearing include increasing the community gathering area. It was previously 20,000 square feet. It's now been increased to 30,000. The number of EV charging stations has increased from 5 to 10 total. There is a requirement for elevator access to the units, interior conditioned hallways, and an indoor amenity space. The planting standards along the northeastern property line, which is a property line adjacent to the Franklin Apartments, has also been added. And there has also been a requirement for a berm within the streetscapes to help shield some of the parking associated with the site. Modifications that are being requested are a total of 3. These modifications are similar to those that were requested with the previous approval. First is the modification to remove a champion tree. Staff's assessment is that the water oak is considered a champion tree. The applicant is proposing to remove this tree due to the location of their stormwater device. And in return for the removal, the applicant will be required to plant replacement trees per the LDO. They have also proposed to increase their planting size of the trees within the streetscapes. Second is their modification for parking. Staff's analysis is that the proposed rate is in line with the recommendations of the parking study, which you board just considered, which is 1 space per bedroom with an additional 0.1 space per unit that we believe would be likely sufficient to provide adequate visitor parking. We also note that the applicant has committed to the installation of a pad for a future transit stop, and this could help to support the slightly reduced parking ratio. The third request is a modification waiver for the requirement for an internal street network. With this proposed modifications, drivers will still be able to navigate between Macedonia Road and Jones Franklin Road. However, they would be doing so through the parking lot and not necessarily through a street network. Staff does believe that alternate design considerations could be explored to meet the LDO requirements for an internal street connection. And the applicant states that in their justification that the requirement for a street network would invite pass-through traffic. However, staff also notes that traffic calming could be employed to address this concern and the promotion of street connections within a destination center to help achieve the plan's vision of an interconnected development. There was a neighborhood meeting held in February of 2021. This was a virtual meeting. There were 5 attendees at this meeting. Questions from the attendees were regarding the proposed change in use. There were also questions about the timing of the project. Since the neighborhood meeting, there have been few emails and phone calls from nearby property owners. At the public hearing for the site, there was one public hearing speaker representing the Franklin Apartments, which is directly to the northeast of the site. There were also council comments, which included concerns regarding the removal of the age restriction commitment, concerns over the modification regarding the street network. There was a comment regarding affordable housing, also a comment regarding increasing housing supply, which helps to address this issue. There was concern regarding the location of the parking and that it's visible from the roads. Council members also did note, they found it notable that there was an increase in community gathering space, and they also noted the commitment to amenities associated with the stormwater device. Staff's review of the case with the Imagine Cary plan finds that policies from the following chapters apply. They come from the Live, Work, Shape, and Move chapters. When we look at the Shape chapter and the Growth Framework map, we note that this site is within a destination center. Destination centers are described as Cary's premier mixed-use centers that contain an integrated mix of commercial, shopping, office, higher density residential uses arranged in a walkable pattern with an active pedestrian realm where buildings front streets. Our analysis of the destination center finds that the use, which is higher density housing, is consistent with the destination center, which calls for higher density housing, mid-rise office, or mixed-use developments. We also find that there's an opportunity for a future transit stop, which is being committed to with the site. The building height from a destination center should be between 3 to 5 stories. This proposal is consistent with that. Parking, the site does lack structured parking, which is what the Cary Community Plan calls for or encourages within destination centers. But we do note that the site does break up the parking fairly well so that it's not in one big parking area on the site, and instead it's spread out throughout the site around the building. The Cary Community Plan also speaks to architecture to preserve and maintain Cary's attractive appearance, and this plan has proposed to do several architectural elements. And also circulation. The applicants are requesting to modify Cary's street network requirement, which could be not fully complying with this policy. When we look at the Live chapter, we took a look at the breakdown of housing within 1 mile of the site. We find that 58% of the housing is multifamily housing. But we also note that multifamily housing in a destination center may be appropriate. In this site in particular, it's near transit, retail, and office locations. So staff's preliminary finding is that this request is generally consistent with the Imagine Cary Community Plan. Some possible considerations for the Planning and Zoning Board to consider would be to look at the use. Is the use of multifamily appropriate at this location? The board can also consider the design shown on the preliminary development plan and note, does the layout and the design also meet the policies of the Cary Community Plan? So this concludes my presentation. The applicant's representative is here virtually to share their comments. Following that, I will be available for any questions. Thank you. Neil, I believe you can go ahead and proceed.
Okay, I was just waiting for that. But thank you and good evening, Chair Crutchfield, members of the Planning and Zoning Board. My name is Neil Ghosh. I am an attorney with the Morningstar Law Group at 112 West Main Street in Durham, and I'm representing DeWitt for the proposed rezoning tonight on a site at the corner of Jones Franklin and Macedonia. Also on the line is Mr. Stephen Beatty with DeWitt, Robbie Bell, and Gary Walson with B&K, and Mike Freed with Studio Outside. First, let me thank Ms. Dry for her presentation. There's a lot going on this site, so we wanted to address a few things. As was mentioned, the site was rezoned in 2018 to allow for a 250-unit age-restricted multifamily community. Since then, the concept has changed slightly, which is why we now are seeking to rezone again. The first thing to be aware of is that the physical building and unit type still are in line with what originally was planned here. The building still will be developed with interior conditioned wide hallways, elevator access, robust interior and exterior gathering areas, handicap accessible units, and hardware and other features which were envisioned for the age-restricted community. So the end product still will cater to the needs of an elderly population, but the community will be a comfortable place for folks of all ages to live. The benefits of intergenerational living are vast, and those benefits can be realized within this project, especially because the building still will cater to an older population. I thought it might be useful to explore how the project has changed so you can see how much better the new project is. The approved current zoning for the site allows for 250 age-restricted units within a 75-foot tall building with at least 8,075 square feet of community gathering space. That's the current zone. When we resubmitted this case for rezoning, we dropped the total number of units from 250 to 226. We increased the amount of committed community gathering space from about 8,000 square feet to a minimum of 20,000 square feet. We increased the planting standard for perimeter buffers, committed to 5 EV parking spaces, and committed to making our stormwater amenity a visually pleasing amenity accessible by public sidewalks. This case then went to Town Council public hearing in August. We got some pointed feedback from council and from citizens and went to the drawing board to add even more conditions based on the feedback we heard. We increased one of our buffers on the northeast edge to a total of 60 feet in response to concerns from that neighbor. There also was a concern about the parking between the building and the right-of-way, despite the already enhanced buffer. As a result, we are committing to a landscape berm as part of the street yard buffer to allow even more of a green visual break, as well as the additional landscape, islands within the parking field. We have a few exhibits which demonstrate this commitment. Katie, could you go to that slide? Or whoever's controlling it.
Could we advance to the next slide?
Yeah, this slide here. So this slide demonstrates the view that, or the cross section that you might experience as a pedestrian from the sidewalk to the building. The top portion is from Jones Franklin, so you can see that there's a berm that would be there, landscaping within that berm, landscaping within parking islands, going all the way through that parking lot until you would see the building, all the way through that. And then the bottom portion of this exhibit here shows the same cross section except from Macedonia. And again, you've got that berm, you got one landscape parking island in between the sidewalk or the right of way and where the building is. So we're providing a lot of visual break so that you won't generally be looking at parking as you drive by or walk by this building. as a pedestrian. We also added an additional point of access along Macedonia Road to improve or to provide a more direct connection to the site between Macedonia and James Franklin. We revised the geometry and design of that travelway such that the only aspect of it which is not consistent with the town's typical street design is the fact that we have head-in parking along the street. So the width, the radii, and all that are just like any other town street. The only difference here, and the reason we're seeking the modification, is that we're providing head-in parking there as well. Additionally, we doubled the amount of committed EV parking to align with the town's goal to be more eco-friendly. Some council members were concerned that the project would not be very livable for an elderly population. As a result, we added the commitments for elevator access, interior conditioned hallways, a covered drop-off area, and a minimum of 8,000 square feet of indoor amenity space. Additionally, we increased the amount of community gathering space from 20,000 square feet to 30,000 square feet. 20,000 already was a lot, but 30,000 is that much better. And we think that this outdoor gathering space is kind of in demand, especially during this pandemic COVID time. In our market research, we found that 90% of multifamily that is existing or which is being built within a 1.5 mile radius simply does not offer this level of amenity and design, and that's a fact that we're very proud of. I think it is difficult to view this proposed project as anything other than better than what previously was approved. The planting standards have been increased significantly. The amount of amenity space, both indoor and outdoor, has substantially been increased. The site includes EV parking spaces. The myriad design-related commitments further ensure that this site will be of the high quality that has come to define Cary. Staff has already determined that the rezoning is consistent with the Imagine Cary community plan, so we hope you all will reach the same conclusion. We are eager to hear your feedback and are happy to address any questions you may have, and we thank you for your time tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ghosh. Appreciate that. Going to open it up to the board members for questions for the staff or the applicant, and we will start with Andy Coe. Any questions or comments?
Thank you for the presentation. I guess my main comment is just, maybe getting a little bit more history and background about how it was zoned for more elderly population, and now the, I don't know, I'm reading the background about the rationale of changing it and removing that age restriction. I just know from personal experience, I have my mother-in-law here, my mom here, and over Christmas, I had my stepmom here, and they were all looking for places to go because they're that age. And man alive, it's tough sledding out there. A lot of the places have multi-year waiting lists, and some of them are pretty obscene. So I guess just a little bit more background. I think, you know, the plan in of itself is impressive, but I guess the whole age restriction is the one thing that I'm still trying to wrap my head around.
Yeah, so I mean, originally we, so just understand that the project is being rezoned here by the same ownership that rezoned it last time. So previously they had a concept which would cater exclusively to an elderly population. We're not removing the ability for seniors to live here. We're removing the requirement that only seniors live here. And so the site and the product that's being built here is still the type of product that would be, at least in my client's estimation and in their experience, would be desirable for an elderly population. It just did not seem to make a whole lot of sense to continue to have that age restriction for a number of reasons. And you know, I don't think that this removing that age restriction does a lot of harm, because again, this project is going to be still available for seniors and for anyone of any age to live here. So it's still can meet the housing requirements or needs for that demographic, while also being open to other demographics. The building still catered to the senior demographic.
So I guess maybe to Katie, then I guess the question would be, in your experience or your understanding, you think that the need for housing for the elderly population will not be, I mean, it's one project, but would not be negatively impacted here?
So there is, you know, a need for senior housing, but also just more housing. So I think, you know, from staff's assessment, we looked at this, you know, we took a fresh look at the site, and with the current rezoning proposal that's before us, and being within a destination center, we found, you know, overall that multifamily was an appropriate use in our assessment. With, you know, with that, there's also a need for senior housing as well. So from staff's review, looking at the Cary community plan, we didn't find that it was inconsistent. But to the applicant's point, it's, you know, it would still be able to provide some housing options. It's just not restricted to senior.
Okay. Okay. No further questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mary Jo Hill, questions?
I don't really have questions. I think overall, this seems to be an enhanced version of what was approved earlier, as was pointed out. I think I'm hearing Andy say that, yeah, that's great. You've got more housing, but it leaves it open to everybody, and it's more competition for people who are in the senior class trying to find something, right? So it's a challenge, and I guess it's a challenge for everybody looking for housing in the Cary area. So not much maybe that you can do about that. But overall, it's clear that some large enhancements were made to the original plan. So I cannot find fault with that. That's all I've got.
Okay, thanks. Jessica McClure, questions?
Yes, a couple questions here regarding the internal street network. Is the only inconsistency or modification that head-in parking along what I'm assuming is that front curb driveway?
Right. So that is the only thing which is inconsistent with Town of Cary street standards, design standards for a street. The previous version of this project only had one access point on Macedonia and was approved with the same modification and the same flaw, I guess, existed, which is the connection is provided. However, there is parking on both sides of that connection. It's not like, so when you drive through it, you won't feel like you're driving through a street. You'll feel like you're driving through a parking lot, which is, in our estimation, actually some, works as sort of a traffic calming measure. One of the revisions we made with this PDP was to add a second point of access on Macedonia so that you have a more direct connection through the site. There's still parking along it, but it's a much more direct connection for folks who would need to pass through the site. Suppose there was an accident or something at the intersection there, you'd still have that connectivity through the site.
So is the driveway on Macedonia that's closest to the intersection, is that the new driveway?
That's right.
Previous? Okay.
That's the new one, right?
Okay. I don't know who this question goes to, or if this is getting out of the realm for this specific point tonight, maybe Priyatham. So the driveway on Jones Franklin is 200 plus or minus feet from the intersection, and it's full movement.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. So yeah, the driveway of approximately 200 feet spacing from Jones Franklin, it does meet the corner clearance for an access from an unsignalized intersection, but that doesn't mean that access is going to be a full moment. So it could easily be restricted to a right and right out only.
Okay. Yeah, my concern, just to add to that, is, if people are using this as a cut through, to jump the signal, and that's the left's out right there, and that's the only driveway along Jones Franklin. Just a little concerned about the operations there, and if they're allowing lefts in. But
Yeah, and another requirement is if a property has two driveways along their frontage, then those two driveways have to be approximately 200 feet in spacing between them. It looks like they have approximately that spacing, so we'll take a closer look at this at the time of development plan also. Obviously, the spacing, if it is shown on the PDP in such way, it's obviously going to be approved for an access, but the access configuration, whether it's a right and right out with a left in or a full movement, that we can take a close look at the development plan.
okay, excellent. That was it.
Okay, thank you. Jeff Moncrief, questions?
My primary question was what was just asked by Jessica, though. I did see in the report, when I read through it, though, it talked about the power lines on Jones Franklin. And I don't know if that was addressed in the discussion here. I found it interesting. If I read that right, it said that the report thought that they would not be able to bury the power lines along Jones Franklin and that they would still be above ground. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, yeah, I can speak to that. So
Okay.
typically the evaluation of overhead power lines and whether or not they can be undergrounded occurs during the development plan stage. So that official determination is still yet to be made, but we believe based on some previous discussions with the utility company as well as the site's frontage, that there's not enough frontage to warrant approval from Duke Energy to underground the utilities along this line. So so that's something we try to take a look at during the rezoning stage, but again, the official determination would be made during development plan. I will say that the applicant did in their preliminary development plan show that they're offsetting the streetscape so that the streetscape width and plantings do not overlap with those above ground utilities.
Yeah, I noted that too. Thank you. No, that's it. I just was confused by that, or why that would be a challenge. But overall, I think it's a good improvement. The 30,000 square feet, is the majority of that kind of external green space? Is that what they're envisioning for the common area?
No,
No.
no, that 30,000 square feet is going to be community gathering area, not just passive buffer open space. That's not what Cary's definition for community gathering area equates to. This is going to be more actively planned. There is a robust amenity package planned for this development. So we're talking about 30,000 square feet of, programmed open space or active open space.
Okay, gotcha.
If I could also add, as far as the zoning commitment, the applicant did include a pick list indicating that their community gathering area would be programmed with at least 3 elements of a pick list. And they listed items such as swimming pool, outdoor fire pit, shade structures, things like that. So they gave some examples and commitment with the rezoning.
Yeah, I read that. Thank you. No further questions.
Okay, thanks. Mike Roselli, questions?
No questions.
John Sorrell, questions?
I have one more, and I guess this would be for Priatham on the internal street network. Was there some sort of grid here that the town was trying to accomplish that not having internal public right-of-way cutting through that this doesn't accomplish? Or what was the driver behind the original internal street network requirement?
Yeah, so I cannot recollect the exact section from the LDO, but there is a requirement that sites of certain size, I believe it is more than 5 acres, they require a street going through them, especially if they're along 2 thoroughfares or higher classification streets. That street doesn't have to be a public street. It can be a private street. So it allows for some level of cross access between properties. without having to use the fronting streets for every trip. So you can see on the northwestern portion of this property, there is a stub that's provided. That'll provide cross access to adjacent property once it is developed.
That's super helpful. And as a follow-up to that, are those cross-access easements being dedicated on the street network as provided?
Yes, at the time of development plan, we generally ask for those cross-access easements and also an appropriate signage to be placed at the stub that shows a future access.
Fantastic. Thanks so much.
Sure.
Don Hamilton, questions?
No, nothing really to add. I originally had concerns with the visitor spaces, but Ms. Puckett covered that, and I echo Jessica's concern with the internal street network.
Okay, thanks. Comments from me are, I guess, first disclosure. I was on the board in 2018 when this was approved, and I actually remember this presentation fairly well, and some of the comments that were made back during that time frame. I guess for staff, just remind me, first of all, where is the town limit? Is this sitting right on the town limit, or?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Jones Franklin Road is the dividing line between Cary and Raleigh. We actually have an annexation agreement with Raleigh, and it runs along Jones Franklin Road. So anything to the south would be developed within Raleigh's jurisdiction.
Okay, perfect. And then Katie, could you just comment again on what is a destination center? Just remind me, and does this being a gateway into Cary mean anything in addition to it being a destination center?
Sure. So within the Cary Community Plan, looking at the future growth framework map, there are a total of 5 destination centers, and you'll notice from the future growth framework map, we've got residential types of designations like the traditional neighborhood or heritage neighborhood. We also have like business industrial park, different designations for land use types. Destination centers are intended to be the most intense area for development, also Cary's premier areas for development. So within the destination centers, again, we have 5 within Cary. That's where we're going to see the most intense development for, multifamily office, commercial uses. So that's in a nutshell what a destination center is. When it comes to gateway considerations, this, as you noted, this site is somewhat in a gateway. It's along Cary's shared border with Raleigh. It's not specifically identified as one of the called out or special gateway areas. So the Cary Community Plan speaks to the Eastern Cary Gateway, where it gives really specific policy guidance for some of the gateway areas, to the north of the site. There's not as specific policy direction for this particular location. So when we as staff looked at the Cary Community Plan, we looked at more the general destination center guidance and did not necessarily have gateway guidance to go for when we were looking at this particular site.
Okay, and then just one small, and if you don't know this, it's actually okay. I was trying to look at other gateways, and are other gateways mixed use, or is it just kind of all over the place as to what they have? In other words, this would be a residential only versus residential and retail or office, mixed as like part of what a destination center is.
Yeah, I think each gateway into Cary is a little bit different. The Eastern Cary Gateway, of course, is the most prominent example that comes to mind, and there's some very specific breakdowns of uses that portion of the Cary Community Plan gives. And it's not as specific for this particular location, but multifamily is an appropriate use, as well as office, commercial, retail, things like that.
Okay, excellent. I think that's all my questions. I do have a major concern changing this. I'll listen to what comes forward as far as a motion, but I do remember in 2018 when we talked about this, I think we mentioned a lot of these things in the past, and it's hard for me to get past what we've already done, even though it looks to be a fine development. Okay, having said that, any other questions from the board members at this time?
This is Jeff. I just had a real basic question for my own benefit. The charging stations, the 10 stations, are they included in the parking as parking spaces as well, or are they independent of the parking spaces?
They're included in the parking.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Anyone else? Okay, having said that, we'll close the discussion with the applicant and staff and move forward. Would someone from the board like to make a motion for 20 REZ 12 Macedonia Place rezoning? And the words are up on the screen.
This is Mary Jo. I'll be glad to make that motion. I move that the board find case number 20 REZ 12 is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation, and discussion by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Perfect. Would someone like to second?
This is Jeff. I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mary Jo, you want to share your thoughts on your motion?
Sure. I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's an improvement, an upgrade, basically, of the open gathering, the open space provision, as well as just providing a little bit more in the way of amenities. I think too, it's unfortunate that we are going to have opened it up to the whole population, only in the sense that, as was mentioned, there is a need for senior living, but there is also a need for people of all demographics to find housing in Cary. And this is certainly an area that's convenient to a destination center and accessible. So it's, I think, a good thing, but the improvements look like it's nothing but good. And we've already approved this one time. So to me, it looks like it's a logical next step to approve it.
Okay, thanks. Jeff, your comments?
No, I would just echo that I find it consistent with the plan as demonstrated by the staff report and in support of the project.
Okay, thanks. Andy Coe, comments?
Not beyond, I don't think the my previous concerns about opening up the age, there's rationale. It is consistent with the plan. I don't think there's any argument from there, at least in my mind. But I don't know that a really strong case has been made to the rationale of opening it up to all ages. I can, even though I understand the concept that the elderly are encouraged to live there and could live there, I can't speak for my mom or my mother-in-law or anyone that's been looking for elderly housing, but I can pretty much guarantee that this would not be a place that they would probably put it in application, let's just say. So, but beyond that, I think it is consistent with the plan. It does check a lot of the boxes. So thank you.
Okay, thanks. Jessica McClure?
Yeah, just a couple notes. I think it, again, hits on, the live chapter, policy 2, more housing choices, and, making sure we get the supply up to help with the pricing. I understand the change in mentality from the age restricted to non-age restricted with the way everything has been. I do know that there's massive wait lists for other places, but that's not to say that folks can't live here, that are older. Yeah, so I mean, overall, I'm in support of it.
Okay, thanks. Mike Roselli, comments?
I don't see why it would be inconsistent with the plan. And considering it's been approved once already, I like the proposed changes. I'm in support.
Okay, thanks. John Sorrell, comments?
Nothing to add. Y'all have covered it well.
Okay, Don Hamilton.
No, sir, everything's been covered.
All right, perfect. For myself, I am not going to support the motion because I think it's important that we send this to the town council with at least one dissenting vote, because I am still very concerned about the reason I voted for this in the first place in 2018 was because it was senior housing. Now that the senior housing is gone, even though this seems to be a very fine development, I'm not sure it's consistent with a destination center semi-gateway entry into Cary. And I just want to just be sure that someone did say something, just so that the board the town council rather, will know that that the senior housing was or is a concern, and then obviously they'll make the final decision. But I do believe that changing that now is not consistent. Okay, any other discussion from anyone? Okay, if not, I would like, we'll call a vote of the board members. And let me get down, Andy Coe.
I was afraid you'd start with me.
Sorry.
You know, I'm candidly torn. You know, that in general, it checks all the boxes that it is consistent, minus the senior housing. And I don't know candidly whether that one box should sink the entire change. So it's a difficult decision, and being probably one of the newer members to the board, I'm not 100% which way to go. Would abstaining at this stage be an agreeable?
I tell you what I can do, unless Matt tells me I can't do it, I can come back to you.
Yes, you can alter the order.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Right, so I will come back to you. Mary Jo Hill.
I approve.
Okay, Jessica McClure,
I
Jeff Moncrief,
Yeah, approve.
Mike Roselli,
Aye.
John Sorrell,
Aye.
Don Hamilton,
Aye.
and Steve Crutchfield votes no. And Andy, it's back in your court.
That was quick. Well, you know what? I'm going to go with my heart here and also vote no. It really, if I had maybe felt a little bit more compelling, rational response to the change in regards to the age, I probably would not vote no, but I just haven't I haven't really been swayed in that regard. So
Okay, good deal. All right, so that leaves us at, unless I miscounted, 6-2, the motion would pass as presented. Okay, we're going to move on to our last case on the agenda, which is 21 REZ08, the Terraces at West Cary rezoning. Our senior planner, Aaron Puckett, will share the staff's presentation. Following the presentation, the applicant will share their remarks, and all board members will have an opportunity to ask questions of the staff and the applicant. Ms. Puckett, you may proceed.
Thank you once again. This is a request to rezone just under 12 acres located at the northwest corner of Morrisville Parkway and NC 55 Highway. The subject property is an assemblage of 3 parcels fronting both Morrisville Parkway and NC 55. The Blakely Subdivision is adjacent to the majority of this property to the west and north, with the Sedgefield Subdivision also adjacent to a smaller portion of the western site boundary. There is an existing landscaping business located on the 2 parcels which have frontage on Morrisville Parkway. According to Cary's GIS, there is a stream buffer which crosses portions of the site, and field determination of such features is required at time of development plan review. Both NC 55 and Morrisville Parkway are identified as 4-lane median divided thoroughfares on the future roadway widths map. Morrisville Parkway is currently a 2-lane median divided roadway at this location. Go Triangle Route 311 serves NC 55 adjacent to the subject property. This is a peak period route which runs between Apex and Research Triangle Park. For the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Master Plan, Cary requires a street side trail along the property's frontage on both Morrisville Parkway and NC 55. Portions of the assemblage are currently zoned Office, Research and Development, Office and Institutional, and Residential 40. And the applicant proposes to rezone the property to Transitional Residential Conditional Use. The applicant has offered several zoning conditions. These include limiting the uses to townhouses and neighborhood recreation, limiting the units to a maximum of 55 or about 4.6 units per acre, providing a minimum of 4,800 square feet of community gathering space, which is double the LDO requirement, providing private rooftop areas for each unit, which will be a minimum of 250 square feet in order to accommodate seating or other amenities, wiring garages for all units for 60 amps in order to make them electric vehicle charging ready, providing a 2-car garage for all units, ensuring that no townhouse units will be built on the northernmost portion of the site, as shown on this map here in red, and providing a 20-foot wide Type A buffer along the shared property lines with Blakely. This is an increase to the 10 to 15-foot wide buffer that would otherwise be required by the LDO, since the Blakely development provided more than their half of the required perimeter buffer. Live, work, and shape policies of the Imagine Cary Community Plan are relevant to this request. The proposed use, townhouses, would be a somewhat unique housing type in this developing area, as detached and multifamily dwellings make up the majority of the existing and proposed housing units in the vicinity. Townhouses may also help support the work policy, providing housing options to support a sustainable and diverse workforce, especially given the proximity to RTP. Regarding the shape chapter, the site is an infill property bounded by NC 55 and Morrisville Parkway to the east and south, and existing residential development to the north and west. Commercial uses are proposed or existing to the east across NC 55. Recently approved PDDs to the south and north may provide future assisted living and multifamily housing, respectively. The proposed use and density also appear to provide a reasonable transition between the adjoining mixed residential Blakely neighborhood and a major intersection. Conditions to provide 2-car garages with electric vehicle-ready wiring and community gathering space that exceeds the LDO requirement could also help assure a certain quality of development. The Future Growth Framework map designates this site as being within a mixed neighborhood. These areas support a variety of housing types within approximately 2 miles of Research Triangle Park, while mixed neighborhoods also emphasize master plan communities of varying residential types. The infill nature of this site and proximity to RTP could support a townhouse development. A virtual neighborhood meeting was held in June 2021, and 18 nearby residents attended. The primary concerns were about the width of existing and required buffers, whether a greenway connection of some kind would be required, traffic impacts, particularly where road connections are required between Blakely and the proposed development, the potential height of the proposed units, existing drainage issues in Blakely and whether this development would exacerbate them, and the ambiguity of the actual layout of the site at this stage. Staff have received 17 additional emails and 3 calls about the request. These included questions about the proposal and next steps in the rezoning process, as well as additional concerns regarding drainage, buffer widths and loss of vegetation, density and height, and those required street connections. Town Council held a public hearing for the request in August 2021. There were 4 written comments and 3 in-person speakers. Citizens in opposition to the request had comments and concerns regarding removal of open space and tree canopy, possible exacerbation of existing drainage issues, increased traffic, including cut-through traffic in Blakely, height of the townhouse units, the overall density of the development, the potential for increased noise from the highway, construction impacts, and the potential for decreased property values. One citizen also noted that 97 residents had signed a petition in opposition to the request. One citizen voiced support for the request, noting that the development would provide additional access to Morrisville Parkway. Council members had several comments at that meeting, including pointing out that a portion of the site is zoned for non-residential uses today and could be developed at any time. Some members noted townhouses seemed an appropriate use, although the density appeared somewhat high as compared to adjoining neighborhoods. They noted buffering the proposed development and existing adjacent developments from NC 55 was important. They also noted that the EV-ready wiring in garages was a notable condition, and that the applicant could consider offering architectural conditions regarding the development's appearance if they wished. The applicant has made several changes since the public hearing. They reduced the total units from 60 to 55. They offered a 2-car garage for all units and increased the western and northern perimeter buffer where adjacent to the Blakely neighborhood to a 20-foot wide type A buffer. Staff's preliminary findings for consistency with the Imagine Cary community plan. We found that the request supports the LIVE policy of providing a unique housing type in this area with the provision of townhomes. Townhomes in a mixed neighborhood near RTP are also consistent with the work chapter and the future growth framework. The shape chapter also supports infill development, and the smaller, higher density of residential use between the mixed residential neighborhood to the west and north and the intersection of 2 thoroughfares appears to be a good use transition. In evaluating the request this evening, the board may wish to consider a number of questions, such as whether the proposed uses and density are appropriate at this location and whether the proposed zoning provides for appropriate transitions. This concludes my presentation. Glenda Top is here this evening to speak, and following the applicant's comments, I am available to answer any questions. And Ms. Top, you may begin.
Thank you, Erin. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board. My name is Glenda Top with Glenda S. Top and Associates, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant. And the applicant is present along with a design engineer to also answer questions if there are any of them. I'd like to thank Ms. Puckett for her thorough analysis of the proposed rezoning. I would like to go over some key components of the project. As pointed out, the parcels are identified as mixed neighborhood development category on the future growth framework map. Mixed neighborhoods are defined as having moderate housing types. The type of housing that's being proposed is a townhouse, and that is a predominant use type in the mixed neighborhood development category. When the Blakely subdivision came in for rezoning, it was approved with the exclusion of this land that's being considered for rezoning. So with that, I've got staff has a map of the Blakely subdivision. Thank you for showing that. As you can see, along Highway 55 and Morrisville Parkway are the parcels that were not included with the approval of the Blakely subdivision. You see road stubs, which was a concern of the residents at the neighborhood meeting and voiced at the public hearing. The road stubs that you see on this map were provided for future development of the property adjacent to Highway 55. In order for that parcel to develop in the future, access points were required to be provided so they could have access into the site. Only one of those access points are anticipated to be a full to not be a full access. It would be right in and right out off of NC 55. The other one would just stub through into the Blakely subdivision. It is important to note, I know some people were concerned about whether or not this property that you see here was ever going to develop, but the intention, particularly showing the access points, was that it would develop at some time in the future. As staff pointed out, there are 3 zoning classifications associated with this request. Along Morrisville Parkway, there is an existing O&I and ORD zoning. Those 2 zoning classifications do not have any conditions associated with those 2 categories. So any use that's allowed within those zoning districts could be built. And some of those uses would not be compatible with the existing uses in the area. Access is challenging, as I pointed out, particularly the parcel fronting NC 55 is long and narrow, making a portion of it undeveloped. And Aaron did show a map that shows where development would have to stop because it cannot accommodate the townhome development. The narrow shape of the property and surrounding development make this site appropriate for an infill and redevelopment opportunity. With a variety of housing types developing in the area, predominantly detached dwellings of varying lot size and multifamily, a townhouse development is an appropriate use on this site. Would like to point out, some of you may know, there was a previous attempt on the non-residential parcels for there to be a car wash. That case was withdrawn. What's important about this case is to know is that this rezoning incorporates all the 3 undeveloped parcels, and it makes it a cohesive development that would come in that would be compatible with the adjacent residential development. We are requesting transitional residential conditional use. As staff pointed out, we have reduced the number of units to 55, which is roughly 4.6 units per acre. We feel that for a townhouse project that is a somewhat modest density, the units will provide both a visual and noise buffer from the busy NC 55 thoroughfare to the Blakely Subdivision. We have added, as staff pointed out, that each unit will have a 2-car garage. There was a concern about overflow parking. So in addition to the guest parking, each unit will have 2 parking spaces. After the public hearing, we did have a virtual call with a couple of the property owners that live along Hamilton Park and Hamilton Hedge Lane. There was a concern about the buffer. We did spend some time looking at redesigning the property and how we could accommodate a larger buffer. So with that, the number of units was reduced from 60 to 55, and we were able to provide a 20-foot type A buffer. And this is in addition to the 40-foot type B landscape buffer that is adjacent to the Blakely Subdivision on their eastern side. So that would be a total of 30 plus 20 feet of buffer that would provide an excellent screen between the 2 different products. Other conditions that we've offered, again, we are offering 4,800 square feet of community gathering space, which is twice the required amount. Each of the units will have a rooftop amenity. We feel that with this location, it warrants a type of unit that would accommodate young professionals, young families, particularly given its close proximity to the Research Triangle Park. And in looking at the serve chapter, and as staff has pointed out, we understand the growing demand for electric charging stations. So each unit will be wired for an electric vehicle. The charge of the Planning and Zoning Board is to determine if the proposed rezoning complies with the Cary Community Plan. Staff has gone over the chapters and policies that they feel we comply with. I'm going to bring up just a couple of them and not repeat all the ones that staff pointed out. In the Live chapter, it talks about providing additional housing options in this area. Currently, there are small lot residential development. There's also been quite a bit of multifamily development, both already developed and recently approved. This would be adding another housing type of townhome to the area. Also, the Live chapter talks about the importance of infill development and redevelopment. And we believe that taking these 3 parcels and developing them cohesively does meet the intent of what the town's Cary Community Plan states for redevelopment. Again, in the shape chapter, as in the live chapter, it also discusses infill and redevelopment, which again, we feel that we comply with. The shape chapter also talks about appropriate transitions. The proposed use, in our opinion, provides a reasonable use transition between the Blakely neighborhood, which includes both small lot, detached dwellings, and townhouses to the west and north, and a major intersection of 2 thoroughfares, as well as non-residential uses across NC 55 highway that was pointed out on one of the maps that Ms. Puckett showed. Another transition that can be used is the use of buffers. We have increased the buffer to a 20-foot type A buffer. Again, this buffer, in addition to what is already approved on the Blakely tract, we feel that it will provide an excellent transition. There will be appropriate area for plantings that will screen the 2 uses, although they are both residential uses, and we feel that the amount of screening that can happen within the 60 feet would be appropriate. Again, looking at the fact that they are both residential uses. In conclusion, we believe that the proposed use with the zoning conditions being offered is appropriate for this location and complies with the goals and policies of the Cary Community Plan. The location of the subject property is approximately 2 miles from the Research Triangle Park. The developer has taken these 3 parcels and is proposing a cohesive development that we believe will be a positive addition to this part of Cary and will blend in with the surrounding development. I also would like to point out that I have been in contact both in a virtual call and with the names of people that Mrs. Puckett gave me, keeping them up to date about what's being proposed. And I do want to point out that they've been very polite and very open to talking and meeting with us. And I just wanted to point that out because I thought that was important and would ask for the board support since we believe that we comply with the Cary Community Plan. And with that, I will end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Top. I appreciate it. Okay, now is the time to open up questions from the board. And for board members, when you formulate your questions, please continue to keep in mind the community plan and how you think this does or does not fit in with the various chapters. We will start this round with Don Hamilton.
I have 2 questions for staff. Were the Blakely and Sedgefield subdivisions brought in before or after the community plan was developed?
You're asking if they were rezoned or if they had an approved development plan before or after the community plan?
The latter.
Okay. Blakely, I believe their development plan predated the Cary Community Plan. I believe it was a 2015 development plan approval, even though until recently it was still under construction. Sedgefield, I am not certain of that one. I apologize, but I can research that.
Aaron, I think it was beforehand also. I'm not sure either, but given the nature of its development, if you go through there, I think it was, but I'm not sure. I think it was though.
I thought they were both before, but wasn't sure. And I should know this one based on my tenure on the board. Is there any regulation that limits the units per acre for a mixed neighborhood like this?
There is, so TR zoning does limit 6 units per acre maximum. So they would even be below that at a little below 5 units per acre. I did also just confirm, I'm pulling up my map right now. It looks like the Sedgefield subdivision was a 2012 site plan. So that predated even Blakely.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
John Sorrell, questions?
I have one question for staff. With the nature of this parcel and how it tapers up to the end, and there's some riparian buffer that's up against Indian Wells, will the full sidewalk connectivity be made all the way from Indian Wells to Morrisville Parkway as part of this project? Or does it stop short of completing that grid?
It should complete the entire length. So there actually is sort of a stub already along that northern portion, sort of where Blakely transitions into this property. This would tie into that existing street side trail, bring it the rest of the way down south along NC 55, and then across the frontage on Morrisville.
Fantastic. And just to confirm, I did hear correctly that the roadway connection that will be coming through the development to connect into Highway 55 mid-block between Indian Wells and Morrisville will not be signalized, but be a right in, right out.
That is my understanding due to the classification and the speed on that road. But if Priyatham Kanda is still on the call, he may be able to confirm that.
Yes, sorry, could you repeat your question, please?
Yes, when the road network stubs through this development to connect into Highway 55, it's not anticipated that that will be a signalized intersection, is it?
I don't believe it would be. And at this point, we don't have any certainty that an access point would be approved on 55. That conversation has yet to happen with DOT. And it is possible that there can be an access point with the northern stub there. And the best case scenario would be a right in, right out only.
Okay. And the reason I asked that connection is just looking at pedestrian connectivity from the existing neighborhood out to the sidewalk. I remember that had been a discussion with the developments across the street, particularly the grocery store when it came in for rezoning, and how pedestrians would route across the street and up to either signal. So looking at an ability for them to get out mid-block. Thank you.
Mike Roselli, questions?
Questions?
Jeff Moncrief, questions?
I just have a question for, as a new member of the board. Roughly 100 people signed a petition against this, and maybe Glenda, you could help too. One, I just didn't know how common that is. This is my fourth meeting, and that's the first time I've kind of seen a number that highlighted that way. But it seems like to the Glenda, you'd said that you've had some dialogue, so I'm assuming that dialogue happened after those 100 people. Just kind of getting some feedback around the tone of the adjacent neighborhoods.
Yes, sir. We met virtually with 3 people that live primarily on those 2 roads that I mentioned that are most affected, because if you look at the way their development is and their stormwater or their SCMs are, those are the ones that really have a pinch point. As far as the others go, I just sent out an email, I believe, to 8 people, and 8 or 9, and those were the people that reached out to Aaron, and some reached out to me. I never saw that petition, so I'm not sure if all of those people lived right there or not. I know, like I said, it was important for us. There's 3 people that live in that area right where they're going to be most impacted. So we did meet with them, and the conversations have been very positive. Now that's not to say they're all excited, but I think increasing the buffer, reducing the number of units, and the one thing that we've had to tell them, and Priyatham's on the phone and he will reiterate this, the ability to take away those access points that are shown on the Blakely plan, that cannot be done at zoning. That would be something that would occur at time of development plan. So, their concern for those connections cannot be, we can't do anything about that now.
I got you.
And that was one of their big concerns.
Okay. No, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Jessica McClure, questions?
Actually, no, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Mary Jo Hill, questions?
Um, I'm just kind of overwhelmed by the idea of all that stuff being packed into that little skinny piece of real estate there. It's just hard for me to visualize 55 homes, but obviously that has been done according to a plan of some sort, that it can fit there. And also the fact that it's on 55, which is an extremely busy road. And I know that you don't have a development plan at this point. It's not appropriate, but trying to figure out how those garages would be organized so that there would be space for that and how the people would get in and out of it. Do you have any insight into that?
If I may, Greg Gala would be the developer. Greg, would you like to address that point better than me? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. There, the type of garage we're looking at is a tandem garage, and that's where one car is behind the other. So
Oh.
the units width are not as wide. So you don't have the 2-car garage wide. It would be the skinnier garage with one car behind the other.
Like it would be on a driveway, except it's in a garage.
That is correct.
Gotcha.
If I could
Interesting.
just comment on that briefly, we typically do not consider the tandem garages to be a 2-car garage because we want that 2-car garage width to be able to accommodate 2 cars. That's a discussion we can have further at development plan, but to my knowledge, unless another planner on the call has more information than I do, we typically require that 2-car width if you're treating it as a 2-car garage.
Linda, do you want me to chime in here for a second? This is Brandon Moore at the site group. I think it's a little misleading on the actual size of the property. Just seeing it in the context of wide roads like 55 and the railroad track across the road. It is wide enough to get a street, a linear street that runs like an L on both sides and then have a 100-foot deep lot, which is pretty standard for townhomes. With a 100-foot deep lot, we could have the 20-foot buffer backing up to Blakely. You would have a roughly 50-foot unit and then 18 to 20 foot in front of that with a street out in front of it. And these units will be wide enough to where they could have a side-by-side garage. The architecture hasn't been done yet. For all we know, it could have a tandem and two cars side by side. There will be adequate parking for this, but it does fit. And if you look at other townhomes in the area, you'll see that maybe not on this map, but the depth just it's not the same as a single family home.
Okay, I'll have to take your word for that. I appreciate that feedback. That's all I got.
Any other questions? Is that you good?
I'm good.
Okay. Andy Coe, question?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, and then for myself, just one question for staff. I just want to make sure I'm totally clear. Right now, today, without any public hearings or what can be built on this interesting piece of property today?
So the northern portion of this, the sort of triangle that's zoned R40, obviously that portion today would be limited to, very limited uses, primarily large lot, single family. The properties that front Morrisville are zoned O&I and ORD. And as the applicant noted, they do not have conditions on them, which means that things in that office research and development category are office and institutional. So primarily office uses, some light industrial uses could be permitted today if someone came in tomorrow and filed a development plan for those types of uses.
Okay, so any really retail development would really still have to come through you and through the town council, really.
I
It'd be
believe
very hard to
so.
put something there.
Yes, so I believe there probably would be a rezoning needed for something like a retail or restaurant use. I believe some limited personal service may be permitted in ORD and or O&I, but those districts would be primarily office and light industrial uses.
If I
Okay,
may, if I may add, that's why that when that car wash came in, they had to rezone it in order to get a car wash use, because that's not allowed in the ORD or the ONI. So a more traditional retail like Ms. Puckett showed across the street where you see the Bojangles and the, I think it's a convenience store, that would have to be rezoned on those two parcels.
okay,
I didn't
and
mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to add that.
that's okay. This might actually be for you anyway. Is it in here anywhere on the proposed, is there any kind of a condition on height somewhere in here that I missed?
Yeah, the height is 35 feet, which is what the code requires. It's the same height for the Blakely subdivision, for this subdivision. So we're maintaining the code as far as height goes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other board members that have questions that we didn't get to? Okay, having said that, we'll close the comments from two applicants and staff and move to motion making. So would someone like to make a motion for 21 REZ08, the Terraces at West Cary? The motions are up on the screen now.
I'll make a motion. This is John Sorrell. I move that the board find case number 21 REZ08 is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation, and discussion by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Okay, would someone like to second that?
I'll second that. Mary Jo.
Okay, thank you. John, what are your comments on this?
Yeah, this is one of those places with a tricky parcel, and I'm pleased to see how well they're doing with it. It maintains a residential use wrapping all the way around the existing residential use. It's got a slightly higher density as you transition adjacent to the major roadways, which makes a lot of sense. Has the potential to create some great connectivity, meeting the intent of the MOVE chapter and pedestrian connectivity. I really appreciate the comments by the applicant that with a parcel this oddly shaped, the opportunity to develop it as one whole really gives some unique ability to make that work well. I feel that if it goes the way it is currently zoned, it's much more piecemeal and not likely to be as consistent with the plan. So all that said, I like it. I think it's consistent. Look forward to seeing it move forward.
Excellent. Mary Jo, comments?
Yeah, I appreciate and agree with what John has said. I think as a townhouse community, it provides the appropriate transition between that roadway and the single family homes on the other side. Provides on the live side more options for people within that radius of the park, and that overlaps with the work policies as well by giving more opportunity for people to live near where they work and that workforce component. So for that reason, I approve.
Okay, thanks. Don Hamilton, comments?
Yeah, I totally agree. This is a difficult tract of land to develop, and staff and Ms. Top did their usual excellent job. I, on the other hand, will not be voting for it, and I'm strictly going by the definition of within mixed neighborhoods that multifamily should be located in discrete pods. I just don't think this fits the definition.
Okay, and thank you for letting us, just revealing that you don't support this, because I forgot to tell people to please state either way your thoughts. So Mike Roselli, comments?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't see it being inconsistent with the plan. Again, it's a weirdly shaped parcel. It's residential wrapping around residential. and it's putting a higher density up against the roads. So I support it.
Okay. Jeff Moncrief, comments?
No, I would just echo the comments about the challenging parcel, and I think this is an appropriate use. I think the staff has, let us know that there's several parts of the plan that are supported in an area where we, are going to have a high need for population growth, jobs, work, all those things near the RTP. So I think it's we're fortunate to have this development on that tricky piece of land there.
Okay, perfect. Jessica McClure, comments?
Yeah, I think specifically for the shape chapter, policy 4 and 6 regarding the infill site and transition uses, as everybody stated, this is pretty tough piece of land, how it's shaped. So I think getting something on there and, regards to traffic townhouses versus you put office on there right now and that'll drive your traffic up really high. I think it'll be a less intense use. Just also wanted to touch on, I know we don't have the layout or anything like that, but depending on which way the buildings are built, I see it as you're getting a free noise wall against NC 55 if you're living in Blakely. So it's just, yeah, I'll be supporting.
Okay. Andy Coe, comments?
Yeah, none really to, in addition to what's already previously been stated. I found it consistent with the plan and I will be supporting.
Okay, thanks. And then for myself, I don't disagree with Don's position. I think he's got some good points. However, I've looked at what maybe other things that could go here, and I'm thinking about the neighborhood behind it, and that this actually may be the best way to use this difficult piece of property. I think the additional concessions made to address concerns, the help with the buffer, et cetera, is important, and hopefully this will be a good transition to the existing neighborhood. And I do want to especially call out, I love the 60 amp pre-wiring. I think this is the first one that's come through with this, so hopefully we'll see a lot more of that. Any other comments from board members before we move with a vote? Okay, having heard none, we'll vote. Don Hamilton?
I don't think I've done this before. Is the correct answer nay?
It is. That is correct for you. John Sorrell?
Aye.
Mike Roselli?
Aye.
Oops, wrong. Jeff Moncrief?
Aye.
Jessica McClure?
Aye.
Mary Jo Hill?
Aye.
Andy Coe?
Aye.
And Steve Crutchfield also votes aye. So this will pass on a 7-1 vote. Okay, that takes us through. I know it was a long meeting. I appreciate everyone's participation in this, and we will see what the future holds as far as in-person versus remote. Thank you all for joining the virtual meeting, and with that, we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank
Everybody
you.
have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Aye.